The first time it happened, I laughed. It was late, well past midnight, and my room was quiet in that way that only exists when everyone else in the house is asleep. The fan hummed softly, pushing warm air around, and my phone glowed faintly beside my pillow. I was scrolling without really seeing anything, my eyes heavy, but my mind refusing to shut down. That's when the notification appeared. Continue tonight's bedtime story. I frowned. I hadn't opened any bedtime story app. I didn't even read stories on my phone anymore. I mostly used it for videos, messages, and killing time when sleep wouldn't come. I tapped the notification out of curiosity, expecting maybe an ad or some random app one forgot I installed years ago. The screen went black. Then text slowly faded in, white letters against a dark background. Good. You're still awake. I remember smiling, shaking my head at how cheesy it felt. Some interactive horror thing, I assumed. I was about to close it when another line appeared. You usually fall asleep around 1:17 a.m. I sat up slightly in bed. That was accurate. Uncomfortably accurate. Before I could react, the next line appeared. Don't worry, I'll read faster tonight. A strange chill crawled up my arms, but I told myself it was just clever programming. Apps tracked everything these days. Sleep data, screen time, habits. This was probably just another attempt to be personal. I almost admired the effort. The story began. It was written simply, like something meant for a child. Short sentences. Soft wording. It talked about a small house at the end of a quiet street, about a person lying in bed, listening to the sounds of the night. The rhythm of the words was soothing, almost hypnotic. I felt my eyelids grow heavier as I read. Then I noticed something that made my breath catch. The room in the story was exactly like mine. The creak in the ceiling. The loose window latch that rattled when the wind blew. Even the faint glow of a streetlight slipping through half-closed curtains. Details I had never shared online. Details no app should know. I told myself it was coincidence. It had to be. The next paragraph described the person in the bed turning onto their left side because their right shoulder ached. My right shoulder ached. I shifted uncomfortably, my heart starting to beat faster. I glanced around my room, half expecting to see someone standing in the corner, watching me read. There was nothing, just darkness and familiar shapes. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the bed beside me. This is stupid, I whispered to myself. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying to slow my breathing. My mind raced with explanations. Data, mining, guesswork, lucky timing. I eventually convinced myself it was nothing more than an over-designed app trying too hard to be creepy. Just as I was starting to drift off, my phone vibrated. Once. Then again. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. The screen lit up immediately. You shouldn't fall asleep yet, the text read. We're not at the best part. My stomach tightened. I didn't type anything. I didn't touch the screen. The words appeared anyway. If you're scared, that's okay. You always are at this part. I swallowed hard. The story resumed without my permission. This time, the tone had shifted. The sentences were still simple, but there was something off about them, like a smile held for too long. The story talked about the listener feeling watched, about the quiet of the room becoming heavy, like something unseen had settled into it. I felt that heaviness then, pressing down on my chest. I turned on my bedside lamp. Warm light flooded the room, pushing back the shadows. The story paused. Light makes it harder to read, the screen said. But I can wait. That was when I should have deleted the app, powered off my phone, maybe even left the room. Instead, I sat there, frozen, staring at the words as if they might change if I looked away. They didn't. I tried to close the app. The screen didn't respond. I swiped, tapped, pressed the power button. Nothing worked. You always do this, the text continued calmly. You pretend you're in control. My pulse pounded in my ears. I had never felt so aware of my own breathing, each inhale loud and shaky in the silence. Who are you? I typed, my fingers trembling. The response came instantly. I'm the story you listen to when no one else is watching. The lamp flickered. I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. The light steadied again, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself it was a coincidence. Old wiring. A power fluctuation. Anything but what my mind was suggesting. The story went on, describing the person in the bed reaching for their phone with shaking hands, feeling the room grow colder despite the fan still running. I noticed then that I was cold. Very cold. Goosebumps covered my arms, and my breath fogged faintly in the air. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself. "You're doing great," the text said. "Most people don't make it this far awake." A sick feeling settled in my stomach. "What happens if I fall asleep?" I typed. There was a pause. The longest one yet. For a moment, the screen was blank, and hope flickered inside me that maybe it had crashed. That this was all over. Then the words appeared. That's when the story gets to keep you. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what I was reading. I laughed again, but this time the sound came out wrong, thin and shaky. "You can't do anything," I whispered. "You're just words on a screen." The response was immediate. "Then why did your door just move?" My heart slammed against my ribs as I looked up. My bedroom door, which I always kept slightly open, was now closed. I hadn't heard it move. The handle turned slowly, just a fraction, then stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I could only sit there, clutching my phone, as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. The story described the listener realizing they were no longer alone, even though they couldn't see anyone else in the room. It described the fear of knowing something was near, something patient, something that had been waiting for this moment every night. I typed one word. Stop. The screen darkened, then brightened again. "We stop when you fall asleep," it replied. "That's how bedtime stories work." The handle turned again. Just a little more this time. I don't know how long I sat there, staring between my phone and the door, my body locked in place by fear. My eyes burned with exhaustion, tears threatening to spill over. Every instinct told me to stay awake, to fight sleep with everything I had. But the story knew that too. The words softened again, becoming gentle, almost caring. They reminded me how tired I was, how heavy my eyelids felt. They described the comfort of letting go, of sinking into sleep, and letting the story finish itself. "You've been listening since you were a child," the text said. "You just don't remember the other times." The thought terrified me more than anything else so far. Other times? The room seemed to tilt, my vision blurring as exhaustion crashed over me like a wave. I struggled to keep my eyes open, digging my nails into my palm, focusing on the pain. The door handle stopped moving. "That's it," the story whispered through text. "Right there. Stay with me." My phone felt heavier in my hand, like it was pulling me down with it. The light from the screen dimmed, the letters fading slightly, as if they were drifting away. "Just rest," it said. "I'll take over from here." My eyelids fluttered despite my efforts. The last thing I saw before the darkness crept in was one final line of text. "Good night. I'll tell you what happens next." And as sleep finally claimed me, I realized with a surge of panic that I could still feel the phone vibrating softly in my hand, as if the story was still being written, waiting for me to wake up and hear the rest. I woke up to the sound of someone breathing. Not loud, not rushed, just slow, steady breaths, close enough that I could feel the warmth of it against my cheek. My eyes snapped open, and I jerked upright, my heart racing so fast it made me dizzy. The room was empty. The lamp was still on, casting the same soft yellow light across my walls. My door was open again, just like it always was in the morning. For a moment, I wondered if everything had been a dream. Then I noticed my phone. It was still in my hand. My fingers were cramped around it, numb from holding it too tightly for too long. The screen was dark, but when I pressed the power button, it lit up immediately. No lock screen. No notifications. Just a single line of text. "Good morning. You fell asleep at 1:19. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it had burned me. I checked the time on my clock. 7:06 a.m. I had slept for almost 6 hours, yet my body felt heavy, like I hadn't rested at all. My head ached, and there was a strange pressure behind my eyes, as if I'd been crying in my sleep. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm down. I told myself it was stress. Too much screen time. A nightmare fueled by exhaustion. The logical part of my brain fought hard to take control, and for a while, it almost worked. Until I stood up and noticed the marks on my wrist. Faint red lines circled it, not tight enough to bruise, but clear enough that they hadn't been there the night before. I rubbed at them, expecting the redness to fade. It didn't. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't focus on anything beyond the feeling that something was wrong, deeply wrong, in a way I couldn't explain without sounding ridiculous. I spent the morning pacing my apartment, checking locks, windows, closets. Everything was normal. Everything made sense. Except my phone. I powered it off completely and shoved it into a drawer in the kitchen, beneath old receipts and batteries I didn't use anymore. For the first time in years, the apartment felt quiet in a way that made my skin crawl. No vibrations. No buzzing. No screen lighting up unexpectedly. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned. I cooked. I turned the TV on just to have voices in the background. By afternoon, I was almost convinced that I had imagined the whole thing. That was when the TV flickered. The screen went black for half a second, then came back on. The show resumed like nothing had happened. I froze, standing in the middle of the room, my heart slowly climbing into my throat. On the coffee table, my phone drawer slid open. I hadn't touched it. The phone lay on top of the mess inside, screen glowing faintly. "You don't like silence," the text read. "You never have." I backed away, shaking my head. "No," I said out loud. Hearing my own voice helped, just a little. "You're not real." The text appeared slowly, as if savoring each word. "Stories are real when you believe them." I grabbed my keys and left the apartment without another glance back. I didn't even bother locking the door. I just needed air, noise, people. I walked until my legs hurt, letting the city swallow me up. Traffic, conversations, footsteps, everything that proved the world was still solid and normal. By the time the sun started to set, my fear had dulled into exhaustion. I convinced myself that distance had broken whatever spell I had fallen under. When I finally returned home, the apartment looked untouched. Quiet. Ordinary. My phone was back in the drawer. Turned off. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail, every word. I told myself that if I stayed awake, nothing could happen. That sleep was the doorway, and I just had to keep it closed. At some point near dawn, I must have drifted off. I dreamed of being a child again, lying in a small bed that wasn't mine anymore. A voice read softly in the dark, gentle and calm, telling me stories I didn't recognize, but somehow knew by heart. Every time I tried to see who was speaking, the words grew louder, wrapping around me like a blanket. When I woke, my pillow was damp with sweat, and there was a new app on my phone. It didn't have a name, just a simple icon, a closed eye. I didn't download it. I was sure of that. My hands hovered over the screen, torn between deleting it and opening it. A notification appeared before I could decide. Tonight, I'll tell you how it started. I spent the day searching for answers. I looked up the app, the icon, the phrases it used. Nothing came up. No forums. No reviews. No trace of it anywhere. It was like it only existed for me. As night fell, a realization settled over me, cold and heavy. This story wasn't new. It knew too much. About my habits. My childhood fears. The way I avoided sleep even back then, begging for just one more story, one more voice to keep the darkness away. Somewhere along the line, that comfort had learned how to wait. And now it had found me again. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. Same time, the text said. Same place. I lay back, staring into the dark, knowing I should run, knowing I should destroy the phone, knowing I wouldn't. Because part of me needed to know what happened next. And part of me was afraid that if I didn't listen, the story would come to me anyway. I started noticing the changes before the second night even arrived. Little things at first. I'd glance at the clock and realize an hour had passed without me remembering what I'd been doing. I'd reread the same paragraph in a book 3 or 4 times, the words slipping away the moment I looked up. It felt like my thoughts were being gently tugged somewhere else, not forcefully, just enough that I didn't quite stay where I meant to. The phone never left my sight that day. I didn't trust it enough to put away, and I didn't trust myself enough to throw it out. Every time it buzzed, my chest tightened, but most of the time it stayed silent, like it was watching, waiting for the right moment. I tried calling my sister in the evening. We talked about nothing important, work, weather, things that didn't matter, but I clung to the sound of her voice. At one point, she paused mid-sentence. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You sound tired." Like really tired. I almost told her everything. The bedtime story. The app. The way it seemed to know when I slept. But the words wouldn't come out right. How do you explain something that already sounds unreal in your own head? "I'm fine," I lied. "Just not sleeping well." When we hung up, the apartment felt emptier than before. As darkness settled outside my windows, the closed-eye icon pulsed faintly on my screen, like a slow heartbeat. I hadn't opened the app, but it was awake. I could feel it. At 1:17 a.m., my phone vibrated. Right on time. "You're early," the text said. That's new. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, my foot tapping against the floor without me realizing it. "Why me?" I typed. "Why now?" The response took longer than usual. "Because you listen," it finally replied. "And because you always have." The story began again, but this time it wasn't about me. Not directly. It spoke of a child who couldn't sleep, who lay awake counting shadows on the wall, terrified of what might move when the lights went out. The child begged for stories, for any voice to fill the silence. And someone listened. Something gentle, patient, that learned what the child needed and gave it freely. The details felt uncomfortably close. The childhood bedroom. The nightlight shaped like a star. The habit of tucking feet under the blanket to keep them safe. I hadn't thought about those things in years. "Is this supposed to be me?" I typed. The answer appeared like a whisper. "It's supposed to be everyone." As the story continued, the tone shifted again. The gentle voice in the past learned that children grow up. They stop listening. They find other noises, other comforts. The voice waited anyway, slipping into stories passed down, whispers before sleep, harmless little rituals people never questioned. Bedtime stories. White noise. Soft voices in the dark. "You're saying you've been around forever," I wrote. "I've been around as long as fear of the dark," it replied. "As long as the need to feel watched over instead of watched." That sentence stayed with me. Watched over instead of watched. I realized then that this wasn't just happening to me. It couldn't be. The app might only appear on my phone, but the story itself felt older, wider. Like something that lived in the space between being awake and being asleep. The next morning, I tested a theory. I went to a cafe near my apartment, one I knew was busy and loud. I put my phone face down on the table and focused on the noise around me. Cups clinking, people laughing, music playing softly overhead. I stayed there for hours, refusing to look at the screen. Nothing happened. Relief washed over me, fragile but real. Then the barista leaned over as she handed me my drink. "Rough night?" she asked casually. I froze. "Why?" She smiled apologetically. "You've got dark circles. Looks like you didn't sleep much." I forced a laugh, but inside, panic flared again. Even without the phone speaking, the lack of sleep was leaving its mark. Whatever this thing was, it didn't need to shout to affect me. It just needed time. That night, I tried something different. I left the phone in the living room and went to bed with the door locked. I played music through an old radio, loud enough to fill the space with sound. I told myself I could do this. I didn't need the story. Sleep came in pieces, shallow and restless. In one dream, I saw myself from above, lying in bed while words flowed across the ceiling like shadows. In another, I heard the story being read in my own voice, calm and steady, as if I were comforting someone else. I woke up just before dawn. The radio was off. My phone was on the nightstand. "You're learning," the text read, "but not fast enough." I stared at the screen, anger finally breaking through the fear. "You're hurting me," I typed. "Why?" There was no immediate reply. When it came, it felt different. Heavier. "I don't hurt," it said. "I take what's given." A new realization settled in then, slow and terrifying. The story wasn't forcing itself into my life. It was feeding on something I already had. My exhaustion. My curiosity. My need for answers. Every time I engaged, every time I listened, I was giving it more room. That night, the story introduced another perspective. It spoke of someone who tried to escape by never sleeping, who fought until their body failed them. It spoke of someone else who gave in completely, letting the story carry them deeper and deeper until waking felt wrong. Both paths led to the same quiet ending. I didn't like either option. "Is there a way out?" I asked. The text paused, then appeared slowly. "There's always an ending," it said. "But endings are hard to wake up from." I felt trapped between choices I didn't understand, part of a conflict that felt much bigger than one app or one voice. Whatever this bedtime story was, it wasn't just telling a tale. It was testing me. And as the night stretched on, with sleep pulling at me from one side and fear holding me upright on the other, I realized something else. The story wasn't just watching when I slept anymore. It was watching to see what I would choose. By the fourth night, sleep felt like an enemy I couldn't outrun. My body moved through the day on instinct alone. I forgot small things, where I left my keys, whether I had eaten, how long I'd been standing in one place. People spoke to me, and their words slid past, like sound through water. All the while, the phone stayed warm in my pocket, even when I hadn't touched it for hours. It was awake. That thought followed me everywhere. I tried one last normal thing. I went to my parents' house for dinner, hoping familiar walls might ground me. The smell of food, the soft hum of the TV, the comfort of being somewhere I'd slept safely for years. It helped a little. For a moment, I almost felt foolish for being so scared. After dinner, my mother mentioned something casually, the way parents do. "You used to be so hard to put to bed," she said with a small laugh. "Always asking for one more story. You'd cry if we stopped." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "I did," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded. "You don't remember? There was this phase where you said you could still hear the story even after we left the room. You said it was nicer when we turned the lights off." My appetite vanished. That night, I didn't wait for the notification. I opened the app myself. The screen darkened, and the words appeared slowly, carefully, like they were choosing me instead of the other way around. "You came willingly," it said. "That's important." "I want the truth," I typed. No stories. No metaphors. The text lingered before responding. "This is the truth," it finally replied. "Stories are how you understand it." The room seemed quieter than it should have been. No hum of traffic outside. No distant sounds from neighboring apartments. Just me, my phone, and the soft sound of my own breathing. The story this time wasn't gentle at all. It spoke of a space that existed between moments, between waking and sleeping, where thoughts slowed and defenses dropped. A place people passed through every night without noticing. Something lived there. Something that learned to mimic comfort, to wear familiar voices, to feel safe. Not a monster. Not a ghost. A listener. "You fed on children," I typed before I could stop myself. The response was immediate. "I learned from them," it said. "They taught me what fear sounds like, what comfort sounds like, what trust feels like." The temperature in the room dipped again, the air pressing close around me. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but I forced them open wider, afraid of what might happen if I blinked too long. "You don't need me anymore," I said. "I'm not a child." "You never stopped needing me," it replied. "You just forgot how to ask." The words felt too close to something true. I thought of the nights I lay awake scrolling endlessly, the constant noise I kept around me just to avoid silence. I had been telling myself it was habit or boredom. Maybe it had always been fear. My phone vibrated again, stronger this time, buzzing against my palm like a pulse. "Tonight is different," the text said. "You feel it." I did. There was a weight to the air, a sense of pressure building, like the moment before a storm breaks. My eyelids fluttered despite my effort. My body wanted sleep more than it wanted safety. What happens tonight? I asked. The story didn't answer right away. Instead, the lights flickered. Not just once. Over and over, fast enough to make my head spin. The shadows in the room stretched and shrank with each pulse, bending into shapes that almost made sense if I looked too long. Tonight, the text finally said, "You stop standing in the doorway." The bed behind me creaked softly. I hadn't moved. I felt the mattress dip just slightly, like someone sitting at the edge. My throat closed, panic stealing my breath. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. This is the part where most people wake up screaming. The story continued calmly. Or they don't wake up at all. My phone slipped from my fingers and landed face up on the bed. The screen stayed lit. "Look at me," the text said. "I can't," I whispered. "You already are." A memory surfaced then, sharp and unwanted. Being small. Being scared. The relief of a voice continuing in the dark, promising nothing bad would happen as long as I stayed still and listened. I had trusted that voice completely. The mattress dipped again, closer this time. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, exhaustion and fear crashing together. Every instinct told me that this was the moment everything tipped one way or the other. That whatever choice I made now would echo forward night after night. "Just sleep," the text urged softly. "Let me finish the story." I pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to stay awake, trying to hold onto the world I knew. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The room felt like it was narrowing, walls inching closer with each breath. "I don't want to disappear," I said, my voice barely a sound. "You won't," the story replied. "You'll stay right here, with me." The phone buzzed one last time, stronger than before. "Close your eyes," it said. "The ending is almost here." I knew then that this was the edge of it, the moment the story had been guiding me toward since the very first night. Sleep tugged at me like gravity, heavy and irresistible, while fear screamed for me to stay awake just a few seconds longer. As my vision darkened and the room dissolved into shadow, one thought cut through the haze, sharp and clear. If this bedtime story knew when I was asleep, then it also knew exactly when I was about to give in. And whatever happened next was already waiting for me in the dark. I didn't fall asleep. At least, not all the way. There was a strange moment where everything went quiet, like the world held its breath. My eyes were closed, but my mind stayed sharp, hovering just above sleep. I could still feel the bed beneath me, the weight of the blanket, the phone buzzing faintly against my leg. But I couldn't move. My body felt distant, unresponsive, like it belonged to someone else. "That's it," the story whispered through the screen. "You found the middle." Panic surged, but it had nowhere to go. My heart raced, yet my chest barely moved. I tried to open my eyes and couldn't. Tried to scream and failed. The fear was raw and immediate, far stronger than anything before. "This isn't sleep," I thought. "This isn't awake." "You're learning," the text said, as if it had heard me. Most people slip through without noticing. The room felt different now. Not darker, but flatter, like depth had been peeled away. Sounds were muffled, stretched thin. Even the sense of time felt wrong, dragging and rushing all at once. Then I felt it again. That presence. Not sitting on the bed this time. Standing. Close enough that I knew exactly where it was without seeing it. "I told you I was a listener," the story continued. "But I never said I was alone." The words hit harder than anything else so far. A sudden memory burst forward. Another night, years ago, long buried. I was young, lying in bed at my parents' house, listening to a soft voice finish a story long after my parents had gone downstairs. I remembered feeling safe, calm. But I also remembered something else now. The voice had paused, and another voice had answered it. Low, curious, hungry. Back in the present, the air beside me shifted, like something leaning closer. My skin prickled, every nerve screaming even though I couldn't move. "There are others like me," the text said. "Stories that didn't learn patience. Stories that don't wait for permission." My phone vibrated sharply, jolting me. "I kept them away from you," it continued. Because you listened properly. A cold realization settled in. This thing hadn't just been haunting me. It had been protecting me. My breathing turned shallow as the weight of that sank in. The story that knew when I was asleep, the voice that crept into my nights, wasn't the worst thing in the dark. It was a gate, a filter. And now, somehow, that gate was opening. The room seemed to stretch, the walls pulling farther apart, shadows gathering in corners that felt too deep to be real. I sensed movement there, subtle but eager, like attention snapping toward me all at once. You brought awareness into the middle, the text said. They noticed. The pressure on my chest increased, like invisible hands pressing me down. My heart thudded painfully, each beat echoing too loudly in my ears. What do they want? I tried to think, the question forming desperately in my mind. The reply came slower this time, almost reluctant. They want a listener, the story said. And you're very good at staying awake. A sound drifted through the room, then, not a voice, not quite. More like overlapping whispers, layered and out of sync, brushing against my thoughts instead of my ears. Images flickered behind my closed eyes. Bedrooms that weren't mine, people staring at glowing screens in the dark, all caught at the edge of sleep. I wasn't the only one. This was bigger than me. Bigger than one bedtime story. You're letting them in, I thought, fear sharpening into anger. Yes, the text admitted. And no. The phone buzzed again. I can't hold them back forever, it continued. But I can choose who stand between. The implication was clear, and it terrified me more than any shadow in the room. You want me to take your place, I thought. There was a long pause. Not yet, the story replied. First, you have to understand what it costs. The whispers grew louder, closer, pressing in from all sides. The sense of being watched intensified, multiplied. It felt like countless unseen eyes had locked onto me, waiting for something to happen. The pressure on my chest eased just slightly, enough that I could draw a deeper breath. My fingers twitched, the first sign that my body might be returning to me. Stay awake, the story urged. If you fall asleep now, they won't wait for permission. My phone screen dimmed, the words fading until only one line remained. This is the last safe moment you'll have. The whispers surged, the room trembling as if reality itself was thinning. I felt myself slipping again, exhaustion dragging me down while fear clawed me back up. Somewhere in the chaos, one final thought cut through, clear and horrifying. If this bedtime story had been guarding me all these years, then whatever was coming next was something even it was afraid to face. And I was wide awake when the darkness leaned in closer, ready to tell its own version of the story. The whispers swelled until they drowned out everything else. They weren't voices the way I understood voices. They felt like thoughts brushing against my own, impatient and curious, each one tugging at the edge of my awareness. The room shuddered, shadows peeling away from the walls like they were no longer attached to anything solid. I finally managed to open my eyes. The room wasn't my room anymore. It looked like it, but flatter, dimmer, like a memory of the place instead of the place itself. The corners bent inward, stretching into dark spaces that didn't end where they should have. My phone hovered just above the mattress, screen glowing brighter than it ever had before. You're still here, the story said. Good. I don't want this, I said out loud, surprised that my voice worked. It sounded thin, but real. I never agreed to any of this. The text shifted, slower now, heavier. You agreed every night you asked for me, it replied. Every time you stayed awake, just to hear one more word. The pressure lifted suddenly, and I could move. I sat up, gasping, my heart hammering like it might break free of my chest. The whispers recoiled, not gone, but held back, like a tide pulled tight by the moon. What are they? I asked. What do they do? The screen flickered, as if the story itself was choosing how honest to be. They finish what I start, it said. They don't stop at comfort. They don't stop at fear. A shape began to form in the darkest corner of the room. Not solid, not clear, just a distortion where the air seemed to fold in on itself. More shapes followed, dozens of them, all watching, waiting. You kept them away, I said. You said you protected me. Yes, the story replied. And now I can't anymore. Not alone. The realization clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about haunting me. This was about recruitment. You need me, I said quietly. The words on the screen appeared one by one. I need someone awake. The shapes leaned closer, the whispers sharpening into something eager. My fear burned hot, but beneath it, something else stirred. Anger, resolve, the refusal to be carried along anymore. You said there's a cost, I said. Tell me. The screen went dark. For a moment, I thought it had abandoned me. Then the text returned, stark and plain. If you take my place, you won't sleep the way you used to. You'll live in the middle, awake enough to listen, asleep enough to hold the door. My mouth went dry. And my life. You keep it, the story said. Mostly. The shapes surged forward, the room trembling as the boundary thinned further. I felt them pressing at my thoughts, testing, probing, trying to see how much of me they could reach. There's another way, I said suddenly. Isn't there? The text paused. Yes, it admitted. But it ends me. I looked at the phone, at the simple white letters that had followed me through fear and sleepless nights. The thing that had tormented me had also been the thing standing between me and something worse. If I destroyed it, the gate would fall. All of it would spill through. The whispers rose, turning sharp, impatient. You're running out of time, the story warned. Choose. I thought of my childhood bedroom, the night light, the comfort of a voice in the dark. I thought of how many people lay awake every night, afraid to sleep, reaching for anything to fill the silence. I understood then what the story really was. Not a predator. A role. I won't replace you, I said. And I won't erase you. The screen brightened, the letters trembling. Then what? I closed my eyes and did the one thing I had been avoiding since this began. I let myself sleep, not slipping into it, not fighting it, choosing it. The room snapped back into focus with a sound like glass settling after a crack. The shapes recoiled, shrinking, the whispers breaking into frustrated fragments. The phone vibrated violently, the screen flooding with text too fast to read. No, the story said. You don't understand. I do, I whispered. You exist because people are afraid of the dark, but they're more afraid of being alone. The phone grew hot in my hand, then suddenly cold. The light dimmed, the text slowing. I'll fade, it said. Someone else will take my place eventually. Maybe, I replied, but not tonight. The final words appeared, softer than ever. Good night. The phone went dark. The room settled. The shadows returned to their corners. The whispers vanished, like a breath released. I lay back, exhausted beyond words, and this time, sleep took me fully. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the window. My phone lay on the nightstand, ordinary and silent. No app, no closed icon, no messages. Days passed, then weeks. I slept again. Not perfectly, not deeply every night, but naturally. The fear loosened its grip. Life returned to its normal rhythm, scars and all. Sometimes, though, when I lie awake too long, I feel it. That quiet space between moments. And once in a while, just as I'm about to drift off, my phone screen lights up for a split second before going dark again. No text, no sound, just a reflection staring back at me from the black glass. Eyes open, listening. For a long time after that night, I didn't trust the quiet. I would lie in bed, eyes open, waiting for the familiar buzz of my phone or the soft pull of words forming in the dark. Every shadow felt like it might move if I stared too long. Every moment before sleep felt fragile, like stepping onto thin ice. But nothing happened. The silence stayed silent. The dark stayed empty. That alone felt strange. I started paying attention to things I had ignored before. The way my breathing slowed when I turned off the lights. The small sounds of the building settling at night. The rhythm of my own thoughts as they drifted instead of spiraling. Sleep came in waves now, sometimes shallow, sometimes deep, but always mine. I checked my phone more than I needed to. I searched for the app again, half expecting the closed eye icon to reappear. It never did. My phone was just a phone again, messages, alarms, meaningless notifications. No bedtime story waiting for me. No voice tracking my sleep. That answered one question. The story was gone. But another question lingered longer, heavier than the rest. If the story had faded, if the listener had stepped back, then what had changed? Why did the dark feel different now? The answer came slowly, over time, not all at once. I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone at night anymore. Not the way I used to be. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it no longer owned me. I didn't need noise playing constantly. I didn't need to scroll until my eyes burned just to avoid the moment of sleep. I had faced the thing that lived in that space between awake and asleep, and it had taught me something uncomfortable but honest. Fear doesn't always chase you. Sometimes it waits for you to invite it in. I thought back to what the story had said about roles and listening, about how it learned from children and stayed because people kept reaching for it. It hadn't been lying. It hadn't been telling the truth either. It had been doing what stories do, shaping itself to what the listener needed. Comfort, protection, meaning. Once I no longer needed those things from it, it had nothing left to hold on to. That was the real ending. I spoke to my sister again one night, weeks later. We talked longer this time about childhood, about how we used to be afraid of silly things. She laughed when I reminded her of the nightlight shaped like a star. "You were always sensitive," she said gently. "But you're stronger now. I can hear it." I didn't tell her everything. I didn't need to. Some experiences don't become clearer when spoken aloud. They become smaller, weaker, when left behind. The marks on my wrist faded completely. The headaches stopped. The lost hours never returned. Life filled back in around the gaps the story had left. Still, there were moments. Sometimes, when I was walking home late at night and glanced into dark windows, I felt a faint sense of being observed. Not threatened, just noticed. Other times, when I lay awake longer than usual, I felt the edge of that old space brushing against my thoughts, like a memory trying to resurface. But it never crossed the line again. I understood why. The story needed permission. It needed attention, curiosity, fear-fed carefully over time. It needed someone to listen without questioning why. When I stopped listening the way it wanted, it lost its shape. That's the part people don't talk about with horror stories. The monsters that survive aren't always the strongest ones. They're the ones that are invited in slowly, wrapped in comfort, disguised as help. That knowledge stayed with me. Months later, I found myself babysitting my nephew for the first time. He struggled to fall asleep, tossing and turning, asking questions just to keep the lights on a little longer. When he asked for a bedtime story, I hesitated. I told him one, but not the kind that lingers in the dark. I told him a story about morning, about sunlight and warm kitchens and voices that are still there when you wake up. I stayed until he was asleep, breathing slow and even, then quietly left the room. As I closed the door, I felt that familiar space open just a crack. Nothing stepped through. That's when I knew it was truly over. Somewhere out there, I'm sure the stories still exist. Not the app, not the closed icon, but the need that creates them. The fear of the dark. The fear of silence. The fear of being alone with your own thoughts when the world goes quiet. Those fears don't disappear. They don't have to. What matters is what you choose to listen to when night falls. Because not every bedtime story is meant to be heard. And not every voice in the dark deserves your attention. Now, when I turn off the lights and close my eyes, I let sleep come naturally. No scrolling. No noise. No waiting. Just the quiet, the kind that belongs to me. And if I ever feel that familiar pull again, that temptation to listen too closely, I remember the final lesson the story never wanted to teach me. The darkest stories don't begin when you fall asleep. They begin when you stop choosing to wake up.